Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to be with my friends, my two friends, talking about
Mhm.
our discussion board, and we we all agreed that we really like this format, but we really wish it could have been like on, not such busy weeks. But anyway, so today we're going to start off questions, and Keisha, let's start with you.
Okay, so we've had obviously a lot of conversations about the different stakeholders that are involved in the MTSS process. And so one of the things that I feel like we haven't gotten to talk as much about is our families and our communities. So my kind of two-part question is how can schools effectively involve families and communities in the MTSS process? And what roles do those stakeholders play in decision making within this framework? And so I don't have the answer, but I will say it kind of ties back to one of the things that we discussed last time, which was that often we feel like we've seen and experienced families getting notified too late, or sometimes not even at all, that their student is receiving intervention.
Mhm.
And so that is definitely an area that I think needs a lot of work when we're talking about the MTSS framework. It's not until um, sometimes it's pull out, sometimes it's not until, parent teacher conferences, or even, when it's time to make that special education referral, that
Right.
parents are being informed that their student is struggling, or what their students' data looks like.
Mm.
So that is just something that I've been thinking about, especially as I was interviewing for our needs assessment project that came up as well. So I don't know if you ladies have any thoughts on that.
I'm pulling something out of my backpack. Kenita, were you going to talk? You go for it.
Okay. I think in a lot of cases, especially in schools where um, there could be English language learner parents who do not speak English and don't feel comfortable communicating. The school needs to have a liaison for that. And the
Mhm.
one school where I've been this week working and I did my interview there, they do have that. And this guy, I mean, he's fabulous because he translates everything that goes to the parents. And, he's the one that can call them on the phone and say, hey, we need you to come in, so on and so forth. And it's just such an important role, but it's so hard to find somebody who is dedicated to doing that on a school salary. So we need to think about giving some more kudos to our translators or and she did say the principal did tell me that they have a translator in every room during conferences, which I
Wow.
think is really, really good.
Yeah. And like you said, really hard to do.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, and like we have one school in that I have a student teacher at next year, and they have like 70 languages at that school
Oh my
because
gosh.
they're next to a refugee center. And so
Hmm.
like this student, she happens to speak fluent Arabic, but she ends up translating all the time, but she also has her own responsibilities. So finding that balance too is anyway.
It
But
is.
we can't like there are so many things, and this kind of goes with my question that I'll get to, but just this idea of like there's so many barriers and there's so many reasons for us to not engage our stakeholders, but we really have to be persistent in figuring out how, because that's kind of our moral duty. Um, and it's really easy to say we have to be persistent in how, but I think depending on certain parents, like I did my master's thesis was on parent volunteers on reading fluency. So I had parents, and it was because I was at a higher socioeconomic school and I had too many parent volunteers and I didn't know what to do with them. So I just trained them all in our fluency program and they worked with different groups throughout the week. Um, but that's a higher school, which seems more logical. But we can't forget. So what I was trying to dig out, sorry, I'm very tired, so very disjointed conversation.
That's okay.
I just went to and I'll maybe like make copies of these. I just went to Idaho's first Literacy Leadership Summit,
Ah,
hosted by my dear friend Sally Brown, who's one of my people in iHelp, that higher ed group I'm part of. And so we spent the last 2 days with like superintendents, principals, instructional coaches, and Dr. Nell Thompson and Claude Goldenberg. And it was just a really amazing 2 days. But one of the superintendents presented his district stuff. And so he has like, this is their flow chart for the school district to make sure, because this is the largest school district in Idaho. So it says like, this is what the law requires. This is how we do it. And then these are all hyperlinks so that even just the stakeholders within the system can find things. Because that's what I see is that a lot of stakeholders don't know. But then they have this parent one that is translated into multiple things and it explains their screening process, like what happens to your kid, what place you'll be notified. It has a link to the Idaho Dyslexia Handbook, which is a fantastic handbook. Louisa Moats was our lead author. And then on the back, it tells them like, these are definitions. This is what's assessed. And it's hyperlinks to practice activities they can do with their kids. And then there's the expectation that teachers are having these conversations like an open house in front of surprising them at conferences. And he said he's noticed a difference in conversations with parents, but he also said a lot of things. So I'm not sure how, but I think it was nice to see a district that had a plan for communication, even an imperfect plan, because at least they were working on educating the parents with what they were doing and why they were doing it.
I wrote down, as y'all were talking, I was like making some notes and like I mentioned it. This is a huge part of my why. So I know you've probably heard me say this several times, but like haven't had experience of being in one of the lowest performing schools and one of the highest performing schools in my district. Really, and Whitney, you kind of touched on this about the culture of what we see as parent involvement, right? In a school where there's higher socioeconomic and more access and more opportunity, you tend to get a lot more parent volunteers. And there's also this culture around the language that we use that parents care more.
Yeah, which is
And
not
it's not true, right? But like that is the language that we tend to use in school systems. Our parents care at these schools because our parents care. I'm like, you think a parent who's sending their kid to school doesn't care? Of course they care. Like everyone cares about their kids and wants them to do well. But I think that's a huge piece about if we're going to involve our parents as stakeholders in MTSS, what does our culture say? Our school culture say about what parent involvement looks like, because it might not look all the same. And we might not be getting our parents in the door all the same way, but their voice and their perspective and their involvement still matters. So our conversation also with Dr. Stoller reminded me last week about what we talked about, like starting from your place of influence, right? And like if we were to think about involving our parents as one of those places of influence, that might look different everywhere. That might look, and so anyway, it's something to think about. I use the UFly curriculum with some of my clients right now, and there is a home practice page that goes home with my kids each time that we work together. And it wasn't until one of my parents of color just coincidentally was like, I don't know what to do with this page. And I had to go digging, which it does exist. It's like a home practice support guide. But I was like, oh man, that's great to link as well. But also, what if this is not the case for this particular parent, but what if parents cannot read themselves? So what do I then do with this home practice support guide that has a lot of text and a lot of language? Well, maybe one day I need to probably sit down and create some videos to support that, right? Like there's all these different things that we don't think about. So that was one of the things I wrote down. And then the other thing too, sorry, this is like, I didn't realize how passionate I was until I started talking. The other thing too, I think is a lot of the time, especially with us, well, a lot of the time I feel like we opt out of parent communication because it's easier. It's easier when you don't have anyone questioning your practices to just do it as you've always done it. It's easier to, whether that's on the resources or the system or just you as a teacher to not involve parents sometimes.
Right.
And so I think that we tend to opt out. And so that's one of the things that I think is a huge barrier.
Yeah, I think you nailed it. And it's cultural, right? Like it's what we believe, and even maybe not what we know we believe. Like I think some of those are implicit and
absolutely
we hold. And to be able to have those conversations and have a culture that challenges each other gently, lovingly. I had a principal my second year of teaching, and it was before I had kids of my own. And it was after conferences, and I went in and I was hot. And I was complaining about this parent. And he said, Whoa, take a second, Winnie. Like, what do you know about that parent? And I said, Well, she doesn't even care. Da 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 da. Like and he's like, Don't you think that she's doing the best that she can? Just because you think her best isn't good enough doesn't mean it changes how you treat her. Like he called me to the carpet. He's like, every parent that puts a kid in your classroom is trusting you. Every parent that puts a kid in your classroom is giving you they're not keeping their good ones at home. They're giving
Hmm.
you their treasures, and they want the best for their kid, even if they don't know how to say it or get to it. So you treat them with that level of respect. And then we were also like, we went to church together. And he's like, also, like biblically, if you treat them like that, I was like, oh, whoa,
Yeah.
okay. But I'm just glad it happened early because it really did shift some of my thinking. But I know I have a long ways to go.
That was,
Even just how scary schools could be for
yes, I
some
wrote that
parents.
down too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it kind of goes with my next question because I don't think we're ever going to solve that, but I think we always
Yeah.
try to. Like
And
my question is cultural too. It's long. So I told you guys I've been in these leadership conferences, um, and it's been so hopeful. And then I listening to Dr. Potter talk about like we use ISIL to examine what's happening, and you use that goldfish analogy about and basically like don't blame kids. We look for those controllable things. And then I was remembering Novak's from last year or last class where like this idea that all kids can learn and we look within ourselves. And so these were just some quotes that I'm just sharing because they were so good.
Mhm.
Um, but thinking about like Dr. Thompson, what she was talking about, we were looking at like risk factors for kids. And she's like, our behavior as teachers either promotes risk or promotes protection. So, what behavior are we choosing? And are we giving them more adverse childhood experiences by our teaching? And I was like, out. Um, but like, what conversational tips can you give me? Because I even have a colleague at the college who promotes this blaming kids, blaming parents attitude. How do we shift that gently as we're seeking to build culture? Because I don't want to alienate teachers either. Like, I want to give them the grace to grow. What does that look like? Because I think that culture is really important.
yeah.
Does that question make sense? Like, what
It
success stories can you tell me about that? Or like I almost need like a script, like sentence stem frames for myself.
hmm
Mm.
And I
Because what I want to say is you're an idiot.
understand. Yeah, and I understand that. Um, I know I was in I started my career in an inner city school, and we got a lot of runoff from Cincinnati Public, which means the kids had been, you know, expelled for whatever reason, and a lot of them had a lot of trouble. In my first grade class, I that year I had, I think, 31 or maybe 32 kids, and three of those kids' parents, one of them, their mother, was in prison, not in jail,
Mhm,
in
mhm,
prison. And I'm thinking to myself, you come in every day and you're happy, and you do whatever I ask you to do, and then in the back of my mind I'm thinking, but where do you have to go home?
mhm,
If this could just be a boarding school, I would take you home with me. And my husband brought up a good point. He said, well, who are you to say that you are a better role model, a better parent than this woman who made some mistakes and now she's paying for those?
yeah.
And, you know, who are you to say that you're better? And I said, well, I didn't say I was better. I'm like, well, it sure did sound like it to me. So when she did get out of prison, then she came to school and I met her, and she was a wonderful person.
Mhm.
But I just felt so bad for her kids, and it was terrible.
It's hard.
It
I've
is.
been I've been thinking a lot because so the school that my last campus that I was at, which was kind of the more affluent school, um had a when I say affluent, I want to be very
Uh-oh. Um, we are having a very bad storm right now, and I think I've lost power.